Ukraine's recapture of the small village of Neskuchny in the eastern Donetsk region on June 10th encapsulates the opening strategy of a major counteroffensive launched earlier this month. Small platoons bank on the element of surprise and, when successful, make incremental gains in territory and battlefield intelligence. We had a few scenarios. In the end, I think we chose the best one. To come quietly, unexpectedly, said Serhiy Zherebelo, the 41-year-old deputy commander of the battalion that retook Neskuchny. Across the 930-mile front line, Ukrainian forces are attempting to wear down the enemy and reshape battle lines to create more favorable conditions for a decisive eastward advance. One strategy could be to try to split Russia's forces in two, so that the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow illegally annexed in 2014, is isolated from the rest of the territory it controls. Ukraine's troops were given a boost of morale last week by an armed rebellion in Russia that posed the most significant threat to President Vladimir Putin's power in more than 2 decades. Yet how the revolt by Wagner Group mercenaries under the command of Russian warlord Yevgeny Prigozhin affects the trajectory of the war remains to be seen. The infighting is a major distraction for Russia's military and political leaders, but experts say the impact on the battlefield so far appears minimal. For the past 4 days, Ukraine has stepped up operations around the eastern city of Bakhmut, which Wagner forces seized after months of intense fighting and then handed over to Russian soldiers, who continue to lose some ground on their southern flank. Along the front line, however, the strength of the Russian military remains unchanged since the revolt. It is not clear where Ukraine will attempt to decisively punch through, but any success will rely on newly formed Western-equipped brigades that are not yet deployed. For now, Russia's deeply fortified positions and relative air superiority are slowing Ukraine's advance. Military experts say it is hard to say who has the advantage. Russia is dug in with manpower and ammunition, while Ukraine is versatile, equipped with modern weaponry and clever on the battlefield. But with the autumn muddy season only 4 months away, some Ukrainian commanders say they are racing against time. Although Ukrainian forces are making small and steady gains, they do not yet have the operational initiative, meaning they are not dictating the tempo and terms of action, said Dylan Lee Lurkey, an analyst with the British security intelligence firm Janes. This has led some observers to claim the counteroffensive is not meeting expectations, Lurka said. But it was never going to resemble Ukraine's blitzkrieg liberation of the eastern Kharkiv region last year, he said, because Russian forces have had too long to prepare fortifications. Russian authorities say Ukraine has suffered substantial losses since the start of the counteroffensive, 259 tanks and 790 armored vehicles, according to Putin, whose claims could not be independently verified. A catastrophic dam collapse last month in the southern Kherson region has altered the geography along the Dnieper River, giving Ukrainians more freedom of movement there. Russian military bloggers claim a small group of Ukrainian fighters are making gains in the area, although Ukrainian officials have not confirmed these reports. Across the agricultural plains of the southeastern Zaporizhzhia region, Ukrainian troops backed by tanks, artillery and drones appear to be chipping away more decisively against Russian positions. Ukrainian troops would deal a severe blow to Russian forces if they managed to regain access to the Sea of Azov from this direction, effectively cutting off Moscow's land bridge to Crimea. It's too early to determine whether this is a realistic goal. They are still a long way off. In an underground command center on the front, a Ukrainian Special Forces commander with the call sign Hunter stares intently at an aerial view of the lush green battlefield. His servicemen have just stormed an enemy position, but the return fire is constant. Russians blast rockets into the air, while his fighters hide and wait for orders. Hunter directs the drone operator to shoot. On the screen, a huge plume of black smoke swells in the air. A hit, he says. The battle here will only get harder, analysts say. Ukrainian troops are still several kilometers from Russia's main defensive lines. As they penetrate deeper into occupied territory, the fighters will have to contend with Russian defenses organized in a diagonal pattern, 10 kilometers deep in some areas, including minefields, anti-tank ditches, and pyramid-shaped obstacles known as dragon's teeth. And with each advance, they become more vulnerable to Russian air attacks. At least 50 square miles of land has been regained in the south since the start of the counteroffensive, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said this week. It's not the pace many hoped for. A U.S. official familiar with the Biden administration thinking said the counteroffensive is a long slog that is testing Ukrainian forces in ways that few other episodes of the 16-month-old war have. The official, who was not authorized to comment and spoke on the condition of anonymity, said that there never was expected to be a D-Day moment, but that the early going suggests the pace of the counteroffensive will be tough and challenging for the Ukrainians. Unlike some of the earlier battles in the war, in which Russian forces showed little resistance or even fled the battlefield, Ukrainian forces are currently facing stiff resistance, the official said. In the northeast, Russian forces have stepped up offensive operations in the direction of the Kremenna forest near Lyman, with the aim of securing a buffer to prevent incursions close to Moscow's supply lines, said Lerka. But it may well have a secondary aim, of forcing more Ukrainian deployments, he said. The dense forested area has proven to be notoriously difficult terrain. The Russians have sabotage groups going into the woods, and there have been cases where they enter behind the first line of Ukrainian defenses, said Pavlo Yusov, a press officer with the National Guard's Thunderstorm Brigade, currently in Lyman. Colonel Volodymyr Selenko, a commander of the 30th Mechanized Brigade operating near Bakhmut, pays no mind to criticism over the pace of attacks. It's much more important to focus on how the adversary is thinking and responding, he said. A war is not a competition of raw force and strength of weapons and people. It's more about who's more cunning, he said. Selenko knows the Russians watch his men, the same way he watches theirs. Moscow sees their movements, how they change, how they evolve. Our job is to outsmart them, he said. Deception was a key part of Ukraine's most significant battlefield success to date, last fall's Kherson ruse. By making it appear that the city of Kherson was the main target of that counteroffensive, Ukrainian forces were able to swiftly retake the northern Kharkiv region. That was a masterclass in deception, said Lerka. Whether they can do the same this time remains to be seen. And a salvo of Ukrainian heavy missiles blasted the vicinity of a Russian helicopter base near the Russian-occupied port city of Berdyansk on the Sea of Azov on Friday. It is possibly the most ambitious and destructive long-range precision-guided weapons strike yet by Kiev mission planners against Kremlin military infrastructure. Most reports said a barrage of at least 10 British Storm Shadow cruise missiles struck around Berdyansk airport over several minutes starting at 8 a.m. If confirmed, the missile raid would mark the single most massive use by armed forces of Ukraine of Western-delivered, medium-range, precision-guided weapons since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. News and social media video from the port city showed 6 thick black smoke columns rising from the vicinity of the Berdyansk airport, a site intensively used by the Russian Air Force since at least mid-June as a base for at least a dozen helicopter gunships and a similar number of reconnaissance and medevac helicopters.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.